Tim Burton and Danny Elfman have teamed up to do a number of films, and I've always liked this Batman theme that Elfman produced. You know, I actually used to own a black Mitsubishi Eclipse, and I loved playing that music when I drove it. Unfortunately, it was a four-cylinder, but, you know, I did make it work. Anyway, that theme was in the 1989 film Batman, starring Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, Kim Basinger, and my next guest, Robert Wuhl. Now, Robert has a number of great and memorable movie and TV credits, including the roles of Larry in Bull Durham, Marty Lee Drywitz in Good Morning Vietnam, Arliss Michaels in the HBO series Arliss, and more recently, the entertaining historical documentary Assume the Position with Robert Wuhl. In Tim Burton's Batman, Robert's character Alexander Knox is a likable, driven, and hard-working news reporter who's always in the middle of a big story. No bigger than the one he has to cover with the beautiful photographer Vicky Vale as they try to find answers about the mysterious Batman lurking around Gotham City. He's joining us today to talk about the experience of being part of Batman's reemergence in popular culture through the 1989 film. And Robert, it's great to have you here, sir. Welcome to The Critic Show.
Thank you.
I think back to 1989 and this new Batman movie is coming out, and it was definitely the buzz of the movie-going public, mainly because, unlike today, we hadn't seen a Batman movie in a while. How did getting the role of Alexander Knox come about for you?
I was brought in to read by a casting director named Marion Dougherty, who was the grand doyenne of casting directors. She'd actually almost started the profession. The casting director is a person who knows the talent scene, and it's their job to put together a bunch of different actors to show the director. So basically, I'd known Marion for many years, and she was always supportive and friendly, but I'd never done any work for her. So she had me come in and audition for her and read for her, and that went well. And then she brought me in to meet Tim Burton and read for him, and that went well. Then Tim saw an early screening of Bull Durham, and that helped a lot.
Yeah.
So Good Morning Vietnam had already been out, so Tim had seen that, and so then I had the job.
Well, were you a fan of Batman and comic books yourself?
I was a fan of the comic books. I was not a big fan of the TV series. It was too jokey, campy for me. So when I read the original script of this one, it was very exciting because I said, boy, this could work. And, of course, the fact they were shooting in London and it was going to be a big-budget movie, it was a very, very exciting time.
Well, how much creative freedom were you given when it came to bringing this character to life?
The script was very good. And so there really wasn't that much that I really had to do. I mean, there was a couple of times I played with some, Tim let me play with stuff. I ad-libbed a line about the King of the Wicker People.
Yeah.
And also the thing about, is there a 6-foot bat, and if so, how much is he pulling down after taxes? There was a couple of lines. But for the most part, it was, I pretty much, I'm an actor. I do what the blueprint of script says and what the director gives you. The interesting thing at Batman is in the original script, Alexander Knox died at the end.
Oh, really?
Yes, and then in all the rehearsals, it was going very well, and everything that they decided to keep him alive. Unfortunately, when they did the sequel, they didn't have him.
What's up with that?
I don't know. I was always looking to that annuity, and it never came.
Well, it's a Tim Burton movie, so things are obviously consistently dark, sometimes a little more morbid, frequently serious, and like you said, it was definitely a good way of bringing the darkness back to something a little more consistent with the comic books, away from the TV series.
Yes.
But it's almost as if Knox is that guy that kind of loosens some of that tensions up a bit with his innocent, kind of silly nature. Would you say that's his role in the film?
I suppose. I mean, Tim allowed that happening. No, but the thing about this, the Batmans, they were fun.
Yeah.
My take on the Batman whole movie series of that incarnation is that every hour of the series got progressively worse. I thought the first hour of the first Batman were really good. Second hour of now they rewrote the second hour quite a lot during shooting, especially the endings and stuff like that. So the second hour was good. The first hour was terrific. Then the next movie I thought was weaker. And the week after that I thought was weaker. And then they really got bad after that.
Yeah.
Hour by hour it got worse.
Tim Burton, we look at him as a creative guy who can, whose mind can obviously take us through a variety of weird and kind of dark places. For you as an actor, what was it like working with him as a director?
Heaven. Absolute heaven. Tim's great. Tim was great. And remember, this was his first really big movie. This was only, his third feature. He had done Pee-wee and Beetlejuice.
Yep.
And now he's doing Batman, which at the time was the most expensive movie in the history of Warner Brothers. So there was a lot riding on this movie. People's jobs are riding on. He's this young guy. He's under a lot of pressure from a lot of... We had very powerful producers with John Peters and Peter Guber, and who were very hands-on. And there was some, at the beginning of the picture, you had cast changes when Sean Young went out and Kim Basinger came in. And it was a very difficult job, but he was just heaven. And he allowed me to watch dailies and become a little part of the process. I love Tim Burton. I just think the world of the guy. Gave me a great opportunity.
Well, one thing I remember back when all the hype was surrounding this film was just the initial confusion, I think, from the audience in the casting of Michael Keaton. Because, not that anybody didn't like him, obviously, but we were so used to seeing him in movies like Mr. Mom and Gung Ho, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense at first. But obviously, he went on to do just a fantastic job at it. Were you in the same boat, and was it really cool to see Michael show up and pull that off?
I was not in the same boat. Here is why. I had known Michael. Michael started out as a stand-up comic, so we knew each other peripherally. Also, I had seen Michael do work on stage where he would go into characters, and I had seen Michael do a movie called Clean and Sober for Warner Brothers.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which is a very dark movie. And Michael's a Pittsburgh kid, and he's athletic, and, Michael's an actor. So I was not in that camp about that. Now, I mean, at first, I guess people could have been shocked by it. But boy, I got to tell you, there were some other people they had thought of. They had thought of Bill Murray too, and they had thought, believe me, these names they were throwing out there because they were thinking more comedically, and Tim wasn't thinking of Tim. And also, even his work as Beetlejuice is darker. Even though it's funny, it's darker.
Yeah, definitely.
So I was not as much worried about that. And of course, the idea of Jack Nicholson playing the Joker at the time was the coup of the century.
Oh, you bet.
I mean, that was I remember seeing the trailer. Just a trailer. I mean, I was on the set every day with Jack, with everybody there, especially the first couple of weeks. And I remember seeing the trailer when he opened up over, I guess it was Christmas time or maybe a little later, the teaser trailer. And I remember seeing the reaction to that. And when Jack, called me Joker or whatever, that whole thing when he first came out.
Yep.
It was so electric. You get these moments in time. You have to be of your time. I once heard George Martin, the producer of all the Beatles albums, talking about the Beatles, and he said they were of their time. And now, obviously, you have to have the goods and everything, but, it was of the time, and it really talked into it. And by the way, with all the hype, people forget there was a lot of naysayers about how dark this movie was going to be.
Yeah, especially with all the tie-ins, merchandising tie-ins.
Yeah, and the merchandising, and even the logo. At the first, people couldn't even make out the logo in the beginning. They just had the teaser of the bat signal. People couldn't quite make it out what it was originally. Now we're used to it. So there was a lot about that.
You were mentioning Jack a few minutes ago, and I've seen a couple interviews you've done with other folks about Batman. It seemed like working with Jack Nicholson was also something that gave you a lot of stories. Can you share one of your stories about Jack with the audience?
Jack is so special in so many ways. Number one, he is one of the great actors of all time. He's also one of the great movie stars of all time. And he is a raconteur and smart and funny. I remember a girl, we were at a club one time, one of the stories I tell, and a girl asked him one time, care to dance? And Jack, in his own way, went, wrong verb. He would sometimes he would offer me a ride back to because we were about almost an hour drive from London, from the hotels to the set Pinewood, which was another spectacular place, going to Pinewood Studio, what they made the Gotham City look like was just spectacular. And that was all Tim's vision, and that's Tim's great stylist. Tim is an artist in that way, a visual artist. But Jack would ride back, and we'd talk stories, and he would talk about the business and talk about meeting people over the years, and and I love that kind of stuff. So that's really one of the highlights of my career would be my whole Batman experience. Everything that encompasses, it just the movie, the premiere, the hype, the actual process, and Jack and Tim. It's just a wonderful, thing when I think about it.
We were talking a moment ago about how this started and then how things progressively didn't necessarily get better as they went along.
In my opinion.
And I think some people would agree, but now we've got this whole nother series that is really taking it off to a whole nother level with Christopher Nolan's vision of it. So how do you look at the two performances? You worked with Jack, and then, of course, not too long ago, we saw another powerful take on Joker with Heath Ledger.
Heath was brilliant. What can you say? It was a great... The whole take, it's a different take, and you have to go in that way, and you have to respect, a craftsman, each artist's position.
Sure.
It's a different take. It's for a different generation, mostly, a younger, even darker so. The one thing that, again, being from slightly older, is that even though the Tim Burton version was considered extremely dark, there was fun to it. The Nolan versions are consistently darker, as I think that just goes with the nature of the tenor of the generation. I find there's not as much fun. I don't find a lot of fun in these Batmans. Great visuals, good storytelling, great performances. It's a great conceit. For me, you are watching a comic book. This is not real. And I don't get as much fun. And, of course, it just goes on your interpretation of fun with the newer series. I mean, they're so well done. They're terrific, but they're lacking fun. And the other thing is they're incredibly long.
Yeah, they are long.
For my own taste, I enjoyed The Dark Knight, but I thought it was 40 minutes too long. I thought the whole Harvey Two-Face thing could have been come out in one. They could have pulled that whole storyline out the second half of the movie, and you would have had a 45-minute picture, which in my mind would have been a better, tighter movie. Now, I am in the minority on this. However, I also know from people who spoke to people over at Warner Bros. That they were dying for the same thing. They actually, from what I heard, they actually went to Chris Nolan and asked him to, pull it out because they had 45 minutes of the next Batman in the can.
Yeah.
And they said, we'll do everything in this. And, of course, him being the filmmaker and being he had final cut, and it's his artistic vision, and he, went with the one that, he went with, which obviously, from a commercial standpoint, was incredibly successful. So, but again, like I said, I felt with the Batman series that I was in, that each hour got progressively worse.
Right, but I understand what you mean by fun, and you've played a lot of really fun characters in Batman, Good Morning Vietnam, and Bull Durham. And then in Arliss, you are a writer and director and actor in that project, and it's a fun series. Obviously, that's a very important part of the projects you involve yourself in, that fun or maybe even humorous factor.
I like good storytelling. I do like fun. I think there should be some laughs. I watched the great actor, English actor Bill Nighy, talking on Charlie Rose a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about that he won't do anything that doesn't have any kind of part that doesn't have at least a few laughs. He goes, I think it's very rude to the audience to make them sit there for a couple hours and not have at least a couple of chuckles. I feel the same way.
That makes perfect sense to me.
And by the way, it can be a heavy, dramatic movie and have a couple of laughs.
Sure, absolutely.
I think that humanizes everybody.
Well, recently you've taken an HBO special called Assume the Position, more or less a comedic spin on American history, but also learning something in the process. And you recently took that on the road and made it into kind of a fun, informative lecture series. Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
we've done that for a couple of years now, and it's been a lot of fun to do. On the theater version, the HBO version was basically a half-hour monologue, with the students, and having fun with that at NYU. The theatrical version, it continues on along that with a bunch of new material and some favorites, a bunch of new material. At the same time, it becomes a little bit more autobiographical about where my journey came from and how I got to be where the storytelling came from with my family. So that's a lot of fun. And now I've just written a play that's about to have its first workshop in about 3 weeks.
Oh, really?
Called Hit Lit, Hitlit. And it's a satire in the publishing industry in the form of a mistaken identity romantic comedy. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. That's what I'm really putting all my efforts into right now. And then we have a couple of the film scripts and some TV projects out there also, but they take forever. So in the meantime, I'm doing that and enjoying New York City and enjoying baseball season as I always do.
Oh, absolutely. Talking about having fun, it sounds like you've got a lot more fun to have in the coming years. And I really appreciate you being on the show today, and it's been great talking to you, and I've enjoyed your work both in film and on TV, so I was very glad to have you on, and thank you so very much for taking time to be on the show today to talk about your role as Alexander Knox in the movie Batman.
Oh, you're very welcome.